So, welcome everybody to FUF, which stands for Swedish Development Forum. We were founded in 1972 and maintained politically and religiously independent since then. Our objective is to provide information and raise awareness on global development issues. These seminars are called Fåtöljen, which is what Sebnem sits on right here, the armchair, you can say it's called in English. And the layout is that we start off with 45 minutes presentation, which is followed by 45 minutes questions and answers. And we will live stream this seminar, so for these questions later we will pass the mic, this mic actually around, so you can all use it, and people online can hear you too. This seminar is quite special because it's a joint seminar together with LSU, which stands for the National Council of Swedish Youth Organizations. And both FUF and LSU are proud to have Sebnem here, which is a privilege. And she's here with the support from the EU project European Year for Development. And Sebnem will discuss the topic of tonight, which is online censorship and freedom of expression in Turkey. So please, Sebnem, the stage is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank FUF, Swedish Development Forum, for hosting this event, and Morgan for arranging this talk. And also LSU, National Youth Council of Swedish National Youth Council, for making this possible. And I would like to thank you for coming. So, as Morgan said, the issue today, the topic that I'm going to discuss is online censorship and freedom of expression in Turkey. And this issue has become an issue of growing concern in Turkey, especially after Gezi protests, because during Gezi protests, the government held social media responsible for mobilizing citizens during the protests. It's not exaggeration to say that there is a sort of ongoing war against digital activism and any sort of opposition in general. And Turkey has built a track record of online censorship in a wide spectrum, like ranging from blocking social media giants like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, WordPress, and to prosecuting or arresting many journalists or citizens, regular citizens, for tweeting or posting some critical views against the government or against Erdogan on Facebook, on Twitter. So there are now many people have ongoing trials based on charges of ambiguous and controversial crimes, such as inciting the public to break the law or insulting the prime minister, insulting the president. So since there were huge outcry both at home and from international community against more overt methods of censorship, such as blocking giants altogether, blocking Twitter, blocking Facebook. And then after this huge reaction from the international community, the government invented more subtle, more indirect ways to avoid these reactions. These are like, instead of blocking the giants altogether, now they prefer to upheld some specific, like withhold some specific content, blocking, removing some specific content, or blocking some particular users instead of blocking YouTube or Facebook altogether. And actually, there are some groups of citizens or organizations, such as those of LGBTI groups, Kurdish organizations, and leftists that have already been suffering from online censorship even long before Gezi protests. Many LGBTI websites were banned for being harmful against so-called general morality, or for being obscene. And many websites and alternative news platforms, news agencies affiliated with especially Kurdish movement, they were blocked in order to protect public morality, public order, and national security. So in this speech, I will discuss how the government use different tactics to limit freedom of expression on internet, and how citizens are affected by these policies and how they react. But let me start with the good news or like an important legal development today. Today, European Court of Human Rights announced a decision about an ongoing case. There were three academics. They were law professors in Turkey. They applied to European Court of Human Rights against, like, they complain about Turkish government's policy to ban YouTube for 3 years. YouTube was banned in Turkey from May 2008 to October 2010, like almost 3 years, because of 10 videos, just 10 videos, which deemed insulting to modern Turkey's founding father Atatürk, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. So because of these 10 videos, like YouTube was banned during this time period, and then these three academics, after all legal procedures completed within Turkey, and they couldn't have reply from the Turkish courts, they just applied to European Court of Human Rights for this violation of rights, and they argued that this ban violated Article 10 of European, I forgot the translation, like the Human Rights Declaration, so which was regulating freedom of expression. And then today, ECHR, they agreed that yes, that was a violation of freedom of expression. So they declared this decision that Turkey had violated the conventions on freedom of expression, and they said that ban actually violated the citizens' freedom to access information, right to receive and impart information. I think a few years ago, European Court of Human Rights made a similar decision for the ban on Google sites in Turkey. That application was made a young person who is Ahmet Yıldırım. I think he is like 29 years old. He applied to the court because his blog was banned as part of the general ban on Google sites. So he won. I think it was 2009. I'm not sure about the date, but as I remember, it was that. And these decisions are important in terms of legal struggle. In practice, I'm not sure if these sort of decision will change the whole practice of online censorship in Turkey, but as a kind of legal basis, probably the prosecutors or the officials in favor of bans will have to find more indirect ways to make this kind of forbidden of websites, etc. So, like, it will not change everything in a day, like with this decision, but it's still important for the legal struggle. So, I would like to mention a bit about the current legislation on internet. there is one Internet Act which was enacted in 2007 in Turkey, and it is the law 5651, which is a famous law in Turkey, and that was the first law regulating internet. Before that, we don't have any law about internet usage. And actually, of course, each country needs a regulation, like legal basis for internet usage. This is especially important for citizens' rights, like rights to access information, especially privacy rights. And it is important in terms of some e-commerce relations. But when we were expecting this law for a long time, but when that was enacted or that was drafted, the content was focusing more on protection of the state, protection of the national security, instead of protection of individuals, instead of individual citizens' rights. So the focus was like more focusing on state interests or interest of the rulers instead of citizens' interests. And now most of the current problems in terms of freedom of expression, online censorship, these are mostly related to that law, because many prosecutors, they are initiating cases based on that law. And in January 2014, there was a omnibus bill passed, and the Internet Act was modified. That was after the corruption scandal that involves bid rigging and money laundering, and there were a huge social campaign, a huge protest on social media against this scandal. And actually, social media was the first medium that this scandal was displayed, or exposed, yeah. So after that scandal, and after it became visible, circulated on social media, they started to find some ways to control social media. And then this law, this new bill passed, and actually the method that this bill passed was also problematic, in the sense that I don't know, have you heard about what is omnibus bill? It's like a kind of mixture of different issues in one bill. We called it like bag, that you put so different things into the bag. So it's not like for opposition parties in the parliament, it is really hard to oppose this, because the current government, current ruling party, have the majority in the parliament. It's had and still have. So they achieved to pass the bill easily with majority voting. So according to these modifications, Telecommunications Authority was allowed without a court order to block web pages. Previously, for blocking a website, Telecommunications Authority, which is the regulatory body in Turkey, they have to apply to the court within, they have to apply to court, and the court needs to give an answer within 48 hours regarding that application. If the court approves, then the authority can block the web page. But after that modification, it became so easy for the authority to block whenever they want with a quick decision. And actually the officials in that authority were claiming, they were really sad that they spent some time in going to the court, getting that decision. So but actually court decision is really important to guarantee that these sort of blocking decisions are lawful or not. Then this sort of balance mechanism was removed in these decisions. So the Telecommunications Authority became the first and the most powerful body in these blocking issues. And now, according to the statistics, the 94% of all access bans or blockings are directly made by Telecommunications Authority. Like maybe the decisions from the courts is just 2% or something. So now there is no checks and balance mechanisms to audit if the decisions are lawful or not. And another thing that was modified with this bill was that now there is an immunity to Telecommunications Authority personal staff. So no criminal investigation for unlawful wiretapping or unlawful monitoring of citizens' browsing histories. There will be no investigation allowed anymore because they are granted immunity. This is also really bad because like they can it's so easy for them to listen people's phone calls, like checking their emails. I mean, there is no privacy of direct privacy anymore for citizens. And this is also like I'm sure it's mostly they're not going to listen regular citizens, but they will mostly listen and like check the emails of activists, like human rights activists, opposition groups. So now we cannot talk about any privacy right anymore. And the other important modification was Telecommunications Authority was allowed to track and collect users' browsing histories without court order, and they can store the data in-house. Previously, they had to ask hosting providers, hosting companies to give them the browsing histories. But now, because they're spending too much time, like going to ask hosting company, blah blah. So now it became more efficient for them. So they can store the data in-house. Like now, I mean, whenever I click on a website, it is monitored and it is stored. Yeah, that is the current legislation. So when we are talking about internet access regime in Turkey, there are two major mechanisms. One is blocking, which is regulated by this law 5651, and by the way, this law is violating our constitution and also international agreements and regulations signed by Turkey. Because in terms of freedom of expression and rights to privacy, we have these sort of laws in our articles in our constitution. But even if this is conflicting with the constitution, it is still active. And the second mechanism is filtering. There is a new central filtering mechanism made by Information Technologies and Communications Authority that was made active in 2011. The reason for this filtering system, central filtering system, is like on the facade, it's for protection of children and prevention of crime. Like protection of children because of this, protecting them from some erotic materials, pornography, or like child abuse. But it should be more individual based, like instead of central filtering system, they call it safe filtering, safe internet. But it should be more individual decide, like individuals decide this instead of central system. But like reason on the facade is this, but when we dig into the real reason, it's more like surveillance and control. It's for this. And after these two regulations and laws became active, we observed a dramatic rise in censorship after these two were enacted. there are these graphics. These two are the number of, like that one is the they harden the access to websites, and like the number of websites that is now access is difficult, like some certain content regulation, because of certain content regulations. And this is the number of bans, access bans on websites. And when you look at the trend, it's getting, I mean, there is a huge increase during the years. I don't know why here it's smaller. Probably because instead of banning the whole website, they make it difficult, and I mean, probably that part is moved to that graphic. So there is a trend, increased trend, a rising trend, especially since 2007, when the law was first enacted. So when we look at what is the target group for this censorship regime, mostly oppositional political activism, mostly pro-Kurdish and leftist activism, and like websites, these are targeted a lot. LGBTI related contents are targeted, and like any sort of there are a lot of bans on pornography and erotic materials. When you clicked on certain website, you always like, it's a kind of common thing to see a kind of warning, this website is banned by blah blah, it's the decision by prosecutor blah blah. So like, this is a kind of regular thing, especially for erotic materials and pornography. So what are the problems? Like, of course, there is an overblocking. According to a civil initiative called Engelli Web, which is like blocked web, it's a website and it's a civil initiative. The number of blocked websites since 2008, it is more than 100,000. So it's huge, like really huge. We are competing with China, North Korea, Iran. And as I said before, the mentality behind these internet access regime is the protection of interests of Erdogan, AKP government, and not the protection of individuals with regards to online content and online services. And the regulatory authorities like the Telecommunications Authority and the Information Technologies Authority, these are highly politicized. They should be independent. According to the law, like the first draft of the laws, they should be independent bodies, but now they're highly politicized and they are serving to the interests of the ruling party, ruling people. And they're not transparent. Since May 2009, Telecommunications Directorate, Telecommunications Authority, they stopped announcing data, statistics and information about blocked internet content. The number that is written there, like 100,000, it's, I mean, this is the at least number. This is the number that is accessed by that civil initiative. We only have access to data and statistics thanks to these civil initiatives tracking data on their websites. Many opposition MPs, they are asking a lot of written motions to the government, to the ministry of, I think, transportation, like yeah, it's under that. They were asking a lot of written motions about the content of the blocking, and I mean, what the numbers, and there is no answers by the government to these written motions. So the only source of knowledge is that Engelli Web, a civil initiative collecting and publishing data about blocked internet content since 2008. And also this current internet access regime, it's not responsive. Even there were a lot of protests since years, like for years, a lot of criticism from public, from civil organizations, from academics, and there is no change. They don't respond to these reactions, these criticisms. So why does the government need online censorship? Because social media is really a tool for social mobilization and political protest against the government, example, Gezi protest. And the government intends to hide some information, some news from the public, but social media and internet is an important place for opposition groups to circulate and access these information and news. There are some examples like why the government needs online censorship, because, for example, there was a leak of audio recordings of a high-level security meeting in March 2004, and it was the security meeting about sending weapons to Syria. Like there was the Prime Minister Davutoğlu, there was the head of intelligence agency, there were several ministries in that meeting, and they were, according to the recordings, they were discussing about provoking a war in Syria. So yeah, they can send some weapons, they can hit certain points, so the war will be provoked there. And then there was a kind of ban on circulation of this news, even on traditional, like conventional media, newspapers, TV channels. They cannot publish any news on that issue even today. But I mean, of course, it's not possible to ban this on internet, because internet is like a huge thing, so it's not possible to block all web pages. Also, there was this massive corruption scandal. Probably you all heard about this. There were some tape leaks showing like high officials and close circle of Erdogan talking about briberies, talking about some bid rigging. And then we had, in April 2015, we had a hostage crisis. One prosecutor, Istanbul prosecutor, he was taken hostage and he was killed. And the news again banned, like no news, no pictures, no information could be published on newspapers or TV channels about that issue. And we had Ankara massacre, again the government, I mean, imagine that there is a massacre in your country and you can see any news on the mainstream media about this because there is a ban. Because about national security, like the justification is either national security, either preventing terrorist propaganda. So I mean, as if there is nothing wrong in your country. Like when you just turn on your television, it's like dream country. So online censorship is also important as a tool of surveillance and control. And current internet access regime is one of government's mechanisms to impose the conservative, nationalist, religious lifestyle and values on public, and control and restrict others who don't fit with these values and lifestyles, such as LGBT lifestyle. There recently, like last week or beginning of November, a lesbian dating website, Lezce, it was banned, like it was blocked. And it's really widely used by lesbians in Turkey. So now there is still block going on. The one officer working in the company, they said that they applied several times to the authority. They talked to the hosting company, hosting provider, but they are waiting for some answers. So I mean, the only content that is allowed on the internet is mostly conservative, nationalist, and religious kind of content. And there is, I said that blocking and filtering, these are two important mechanisms, but there are also other mechanisms that might be more efficient, which is this Article 299 of the Turkish Penal Code. And this article defines crimes of defaming the Turkish president, insulting the Turkish president, and threatening the Turkish president. Previously, we had a Turkish penal code article 201. It was really famous. It was regulating the insulting the Turkish state, its officials, or Turkishness. But that law was amended in 2008 with the thanks to the protests, thanks to the work of civil society organizations and pressure from the international community. But then we were really happy that we got rid of that article. Now we have our new article, which is 299. So only in 2015, just for their postings on social media, like Facebook posts or tweets, at least, as we know, like as civil initiatives got information, at least 23 people have been arrested, either arrested, detained, interrogated, or had ongoing trials on charges of insulting Erdogan. And actually 9 of these 23 were arrested and still under arrest. I mean, these are just the numbers that we know. Probably it is higher. And only in 2015, other than the social media, at least 111 people were arrested, detained, interrogated, or having ongoing trials. The reasons are like for chanting slogans against Erdogan in protests, criticizing Erdogan in their articles, or hanging some banners criticizing the government or, the Erdogan. So this is a really, this is a great, important trouble now for us. And these, as I said, these numbers are coming from 2 people's, really 2 individuals who got some responsibility to collect this data. So source is their Excel sheet. And till here, I mostly talked about internet censorship and social media. But in general, when we check the situation in terms of press freedom, Turkey ranked 154 out of 180 countries in World Press Freedom Index 2014, which was declared by Reporters Without Borders. And since 1992, 22 journalists were murdered. And now, by November 2015, we have 30 journalists are imprisoned. And among these 30, half of these 30 journalists were working for pro-Kurdish newspapers, journals, or radios. 12 of them were working for secular, leftist, or revolutionary newspapers, journals. And 3 were working for pro-Islamic newspapers owned by Gülen community, this parallel structure, as they call. So apart from social media and online censorship, we have also a huge problem of general press freedom. And last week, 2 journalists were arrested on charges of being members of a terror organization, espionage, and revealing confidential documents. And now the charges they are facing might end up like life imprisonment. And the news, they are now facing all these things just for one news that they published. It was about intelligence agencies' trucks carrying weapons to Syria, because that news was also banned, there was a press ban. Because they resisted to this ban and decided to publish this news on the newspaper, now they are in jail. And that guy in the middle is the editor-in-chief of the Cumhuriyet Daily, Can Dündar, and the guy behind, just next to him, he's Erdem Gül, the paper's Ankara representatives. Now they are in prison from last week. So, as I said, there were a lot of reactions coming from international community when governments banned the access to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter altogether. And then the government invented more indirect, more subtle ways of doing this. For example, now they are mostly focusing on demanding Twitter, demanding Facebook or YouTube to remove certain content, like certain YouTube, certain posts. They are really like looking these posts, like looking these individual tweets. I really wonder how much time they're spending to do this, because it's a lot of work. Like you're going to each individual's profile and like learning that, oh, okay, so that is a problem, that's a problem person. So they are demanding, like writing a lot of things to Twitter, just please remove this, blah blah. And then Twitter, they started to reject, like they reject certain demands from the government. And this is the statistics coming from Twitter Transparency Report. These are information requests, not the content removals. I will come to removal requests later in the next slide. Like these are information requests about certain profiles. They are asking the IP addresses. If they get the IP addresses, they can identify the person. So they will start a trial. They will start a case against that person. That's why they are requesting a lot of information from Twitter and Facebook. I think Facebook doesn't have a transparency report that sort that as Twitter has, so we don't know how much Facebook is collaborating with Turkish government in terms of providing these informations. But according to results from 2014, the first government the first state is United States and for information request, and the second is Turkey, third is Japan, and Turkey's requests in the whole world, it is 12% of the whole world. A whole country is asking for requests, and in 2014 Twitter didn't give any information, like compliance is 0%, so they didn't give any information. Also, when it comes to 2015, Turkey ranked third in the country for asking information requests, and it is 9%, and it's not complied. Like when you see United States, probably I'm not expert in that issue, but I think it's complied because they are it's lawful. That's why they accepted to comply. But when you see it's 0%, that means that this is unlawful even in Turkish law. Like the demands is conflicting with Turkish law. This is, I mean, the thing is like, just one more. I want to also point out that this is Turkey's statistics, and it is really on rise for 2014. Like it was one request in other years, but now it's 412. So they are really working on this because they realize that if they block Twitter altogether, I mean, it's a huge crisis. It's in terms of international prestige, it's a huge crisis. Then they started to focus on individuals. That's why it's on the rise. And this is the removal request. And now we are ranked first. I'm so proud. Look, I mean, these are really impressive statistics. Turkey in the whole country ranked first with 60% of all removal requests in the world, 60%. And the follower, Russia, is just 11%. And Twitter objected, they first objected 70% of these requests. And imagine that, like, the lawyers working for Twitter in Istanbul, they are spending a lot of time for writing objections to the Turkish courts. And probably it's a lot of money for Twitter, paying their salaries of the lawyers. Like, they're spending a lot of time just for writing objections. And at one point, I'm afraid Twitter might give up this. Like, we are reducing our costs. We don't want to write objections anymore because it's cost us a lot of money. So I mean, that might happen. No one can know. Now, probably for their corporations' prestige in the world, they try to be more comply with the international human rights standards, but at some point they might give up. And even they objected 70% to the Turkish courts, they still had to comply 50% of the whole requests coming from Turkey, because Turkish courts, they are rejecting the objections coming from Twitter. They say that this is our national law, so you have to comply with it. You have to give this information to us. And I mean, these are the numbers of tweets withheld, and these are the number of accounts withheld just in the first half of 2015. And again, it's a clear rise, like it's increasing since 2014. And like, imagine that one day you wake up and you see that you cannot access to Twitter because your profile is just withheld, it's just removed. And when you start objecting to Twitter, you're writing to the headquarters, Istanbul or the United States, where is it? So you're starting. I mean, first of all, if you need to object, you should know English to write this. So it's a lot of work. Like, it's a real struggle to take your profile back, just your Twitter profile. And so, even just in the first half of this year, 125 people lost their profiles. And and in this first half of this year, we are again rated first with 72% of all removal requests coming from governments. So different groups of citizens are getting influenced by these online censorships in different ways. For example, related to LGBT citizens, there is one problem of bans on obtaining domain names. Like, these are the forbidden names on domain names. Like, you know, the domain names are the addresses, website addresses. So, like, gay, where is it? Gay, here, either Turkish word or the English word. They are, I mean, you cannot have any website that includes that word. And let's have a look to the other forbidden names. This 31, it's masturbation in Turkish. Like, it's a kind of
male masturbation. Yeah.
Male. Oh, I didn't know this. I thought it's for everyone. Okay. So it means masturbation. So it's forbidden. Adriana, do you know Adriana Lima? She's so famous in Turkey, and because she's so popular, people are searching a lot for her videos. Her name is also forbidden. Animal, Baldız's sister-in-law, beat, enhancer, nude, chick, escort, skirt, fire, girl, hot, free, gay, hidden, ass, lady, story, homemade, hot, confession, high school student. So you see the fantasies of Turkish people. Like, these are the words Turkish people mostly search for pornos on internet. Breathe, partner, blonde, hot, fat, seen, even the word forbidden is forbidden. Local, adult. I don't know these two. Do you know? X6.
I can imagine, but I don't know.
Do you imagine? I really don't know. I don't have any idea why these are.
I think X6 refers to porn. Just like the X6 in Amsterdam, the red district, there's also a
Ah, okay. Okay. So there was a serious notification, like official notification, sent to hosting providers, and it was written that no domain names with those words can be obtained or used, and the already existing ones will face access bans. So it was a kind of really serious notification went to hosting companies. And there are some unfortunate websites, like even if they have nothing to do with these words, like their content has nothing to do with these words. For example, değişik mezeler, that means like diverse tapas, diverse appetizers, meze. But because these two words are like, stick is penis, like dick. So they have to, they just banned. And for example, çıtır kurabiyem is crunchy cookie. And it's a really cookie company. I mean, it has nothing to do with porno or LGBT content. But because it's çıtır means chick, it is also forbidden. Like, for example, global design. It's like global design, but because two words get together like baldız, which is sister-in-law, which is a fantasy like sister-in-law, it is also forbidden. For example, baki reklam, that one. Reklam is advertisement. Baki is the brand, like Baki advertisement. But because two words get together, which means virgin, bakire is virgin, so it's also forbidden. They are really unfortunate. I don't know what they did. So, I mean, for example, we have a lot of gay websites, but like because you need to avoid gay, like we are using like G zone, G Mag instead of gay magazine, gay zone. So these are all strategies to avoid avoid being forbidden for domain names, but still content is blocked anyways. Yeah. Okay, so I told, by the way, how much time I have?
Not much.
Is it already over?
It's 5 minutes or something.
Oh, okay. Okay, I will finish soon. So I talked a lot about government's policies, government strategies, government tactics, but also there is a lot of resistance, and people also have some strategies to access, to circulate information. For example, there are a lot of protests. This is Yes We Ban. It's the picture is from 2011 protest against internet censorship, and this is also from 2014 protests. That the first one is Stop Censorship, and these are change the ruler, not your DNS. DNS is domain. Okay, I need to check this. Domain name settings. So because we know a lot about these things. Probably you have no idea because you didn't need to use this sort of settings changed, but I will tell you what these are. Domain name settings, DNS. We will usually change domain name settings on computers and mobile devices to access YouTube, Twitter, Facebook in times of blockings. And I mean, it is like your mother, your father, they're asking, please do my DNS settings. It's really something so popular, like it's because people need to access. So even like as a street art, like people writing DNS, this is the 8888 or alternatively 8844. You need to change these settings so you're accessing. I mean, how it works. When you change your DNS setting, it's like it routes traffic through a different country. As if, for example, in Sweden, you are in Sweden or you are in United States, so you can just skip the ban. You can avoid the ban. So I really forgot how to do these settings, but a lot of information is circulating. There are some manuals, like really online manuals.
Just 5 seconds.
Yeah, now you can do this if yeah. So I mean, it's just simple. You just change it and you can access. But of course, I mean, it's tiring to do the settings for each devices, like for iPad, iPhone, computer, blah blah. And because they discovered that people using these DNS settings, they also find, I mean, the government finds some ways to prevent this. Like they also ban these DNS addresses. I'm not knowledgeable technically a lot, but that's why also these numbers change during the time. We discovered new numbers. So I mean, this was a poster for a candidate of AKP government, or like probably he is a mayor, or yeah, probably he is a mayor in AKP. So they just put some numbers also on his face. Another way is virtual private networks, VPN settings. This is another way. Yeah. So to just skip the bans, we use these VPNs which allow an anonymous connection to the web. And like changing the DNS address, the VPN replaces your IP address, allowing to appear like you're in a different country and getting around the censorship. Apart from these daily strategies, there are also legal struggles. For example, in April 2014, the Constitutional Court decided that the ban on Twitter was unlawful. Thanks to European accession process, we got the right to submit, make applications to Constitutional Court individually. Now, I mean, myself can apply to Constitutional Court if I think that my rights are violated and the other lower courts couldn't solve that problem. After like completing all the lower courts, I can apply to Constitutional Court. So you remember these 3 academics that apply to European Court of Human Rights? They also apply to Constitutional Court. They are really, I mean, activist people in this field. So they applied to Constitutional Court, and the court overturned the ban on the social platform Twitter. But the government, it took a lot of time for government to remove the ban, even after the Constitutional Court decision. Like the government official, they made some statements that this is not correct, this decision is not correct, but somehow they have to comply with it. So it was an important victory in the national legal system. And then these 2 European Court of Human Rights decisions that I told you before, Ahmet Yıldırım case and the latest 3 academics case. So in these 2 decisions, court decided that Turkish law didn't allow for wholesale blocking of access, so it violated freedom of expression. So, like, what do we want? What do we demand for this in that issue? First, that law, this horrible internet law, should be abolished. With it, it's not possible to talk about freedom of expression, and the central filtering system should be replaced by individual filtering system, which will be decided by users themselves. And monitoring and surveillance system should be abolished, I mean, because it's conflicting with right to privacy. And the new internet policy should be developed with the wide participation of civil society, academia, and private sector, should guarantee freedom of expression and adults' right to access and consume any type of content. So, I mean, all new internet policy should be in line with basic principles of human rights, basic principles of democracy. Now we are a bit far away from talking about like these new policies, but hopefully one day there will be some improvements. So I know that it's hard to get access to information in English from the Turkish context. So here I wrote down like a couple of websites that might be good for you if you want to read something in English. One is Independent Communication Network, BIANET. It has an English page. LGBTI News Turkey, they're also I mean, all these are not updated so frequently, but still they are important. And revolutionnews.com, it's Turkey category, Turkey session, and jadaliya.com. It's the latest one is mostly focusing on Middle East and North African context, and it has a very good, very developed Turkey section. So yeah, that might be helpful. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. Sorry if I a bit.
Thank you for a fantastic presentation. We could probably go on for 5 minutes further. So straight ahead to some questions. If you have some, please just raise your hand and I can give you the mic. Or else I'll start, because I'm quite curious. We had a quite big debate here in Sweden a couple of years ago where the government want to introduce a surveillance mechanism which gathered all internet information in Swedish of Swedish citizens. What I've noticed is that at least here we have a generation divide. So older people in Sweden doesn't really seem that bothered about having information gathered as young people. How is it in Turkey?
Like in terms of generation difference?
Yeah, is there a generation divide in, you know, seeing the importance of this issue?
I think before generation divide, even among young people, there is a kind of difference between different groups. I think in society generally we have a sort of polarization, like social polarization between opposition groups and supporters of the ruling party and supporters of Erdogan. So for the supporters, they think that these censorships and these sort of limitations sometimes necessary. So apart from like generation divide, even among young people we have this sort of gap. Because for supporters, national security and the Erdogan's prestige and like the government's interests might be more important than individuals' rights to privacy. So for generations, I'm not sure, like I cannot say something like that there is a generation gap. I can't say this.
Is there
because the reason is because of that polarization, even adults or like the older generations, they have a perspective on this, that there is an online censorship and it's these sort of monitoring and surveillance is wrong. And because Turkey is highly politicized, and in terms of internet usage, it is, it's really one of the biggest countries in terms of the number of users, because of the number of population, like more than 75 million. So like even, of course, young people are more frequent users than olders, but olders have a perspective because of the highly politicized atmosphere.
Okay. Yes.
I can do it, I think. Okay. On the matter of state surveillance and how this is affecting now the tracking of possible terrorist attacks, and about this side of the politicians and the society that is actually, as you're saying, supporting them, do you think it's going to be an increase of this power without this terrorist situation around Europe, and how this is going to be influential to this surveillance to grow, or if there's going to be like more activism for civil society for this. So what is your point of view?
For Turkish context, like in terms of this terrorist activity, first we should separate the state's discourse on this terrorism. Like ISIS, it is a terrorist organization in my opinion, and it should be controlled, and the information should be collected about them. But according to government, there are some terrorist organizations that actually having a kind of they are struggling for democracy, for human rights. So who you call terrorist is also a discussion, it's controversial. When it comes to ISIS, or really radical Islamist terror, they don't need to monitor their online browsing or their online communication, because they know a lot about them, and they don't need to. Even like in certain cities, these organizations have cafes, have some socialization places, and everyone knows that this belongs to ISIS. That cafe, that coffee house, it belongs to ISIS. Of course, intelligence agency have a lot of information because they are collaborating in some issues. So they don't need to increase this monitoring or surveillance practices to track ISIS or blah blah. But as you said, they will use that discourse, like, oh, there is an increase in terrorist activities, as a justification to limit freedom of expression, limit people's access to information. So it will be a kind of justification for them. So we should be careful about this terrorism discourse. Even in Europe, it's also the same, like a similar case.
I have would you say it's like a more increased problem for even like more mainstream medias, not only like pro-Kurdish or LGBT sites and those? Is it a more increased problem also for like the big how to explain?
For more mainstream media. It is a problem. Like for example,
increasing.
Yes. For example, we have a huge company, media company called Doğan Holding, Doğan Company. It's a family company. They are one of the very biggest rich companies and the families in Turkey, and they own a group of media companies, firms, a lot of newspapers, a lot of TV channels, and because they had some disagreements with the government, and because they have, by the way, they are not that like opposition as to pro-Kurdish newspapers. They are more systemic, like in the system. But still, because they had some disagreements with the government, they faced with huge taxes, like a lot of $1 million taxes in the last years, and they had to pay. So they had to close down some companies, some media companies, because of that taxes. They had to sell some newspapers, and of course they were owned now by pro-AKP companies. And very recently, like a few months ago, the headquarters of that Doğan family, the Doğan Media Group, it was attacked by youth wing of AKP party. They literally went there and just I think beat some people. They like raised some threats, and even like one of the current MPs, he was the leader of that how do you call it, bullying or attack. He was the leader, and now he is in the parliament. It was just recent case. And like when it comes to nationalism, when it comes to this group, this media group, I cannot say that they're conservative, like religious, they're mostly secular, but when it comes to statism, nationalism, they are totally agree with AKP, but still they are facing with these sort of measures and problems.
But would you say like the AKP voters, do they see the same freedom of expression problem? Do they experience that it's, do they see it as a problem, or how?
AKP supporters?
Yeah.
I think of course like Twitter, ban on Twitter, ban on Facebook, ban on YouTube affects everyone. I think they don't also want this. But when it comes to access ban on LGBT websites, ban on pro-Kurdish websites, ban on Kurdish newspapers or leftist newspapers, or the removal of some individuals' contents on Twitter, Facebook, I think they would agree. But when it comes to the total blockage, like total blocking of the site altogether, they will criticize. That's why I think like one reason is that, as I said, they just switch their strategy. Instead of blocking the website altogether, they're preferring to remove certain contents, individuals' contents. One reason is, of course, like international community, international prestige, but I think one reason also that they are getting reactions, negative reactions from their supporters. Yeah.
I think they're also really good for they really share excuses, you know, with their supporters. And if, for example, the excuse could be is against Erdogan or it's against the state, then all the supporters actually they agree or they accept it. And they say if our party does it, or if Erdogan says that this is the right way, is the right way. They have no right to ask any questions or any, you know, I don't know what you think, but it looks like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Thanks for your wonderful presentation. I wanted to ask a similar question about internet usage, and you answered already with polarization in society, with Erdogan supporters and all oppositional people. But I'm still curious if you could develop a little bit, or just take a guess on how important is internet as a means of freedom of expression. Just, you know, thinking rural, thinking women, and then of course generational question, which you already got. But sorry, the other question that I have is which other important channels are there? If you would say, if your answer would be internet is not the most important or is not the only one. I mean, there is also the vote, for instance, that is an expression of opinion. But which other ways are there? If we see now that all the blockage and filtering, as you were saying, is a manifestation of a very repressive shift in the situation in Turkey, there must be so many other kind of rings and consequences in society at all. I'm thinking about nationalist and religious and very conservative manifestations in society. So which would be other ways to counter this that could be even more widely spread?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks.
Like as you said, I don't have the statistics about internet usage. I'm not very knowledgeable about this, but I'm sure the internet usage is lower for female citizens, and of course in rural areas it is lower, but still it's still important levels. But for example, many women's organizations, we are using social media a lot for some social media campaigns, like for organizing some protests. This is still an important medium. But I mean, you can discuss that how powerful is the link between women's organizations and female citizens. This is also controversial, because like current women's organizations, especially in the ones in Istanbul, yeah, still like middle class, educated, university graduated, kind of that sort of thing. I'm just separating Kurdish women's organizations. They are different. They are so like grassroots. So it's different. But like we. By the way, it's still like for Gezi protest, for example, it was extremely useful both to get organized and to get protected from the violence, because there were a lot of tweets like, be careful, that street, there are a lot of police, don't go that street. Or, I mean, if you are escaping from the police in that street, that number, you can come to my house. Like I can help you, you can rest a bit in my house, I can offer you some food, so after the police just get away, you can escape later. That sort of, I mean, these social media was so important during the protest, and even after Gezi protest, it is still important to get organized and to, I mean, especially when you have a lot of censorship on mainstream media, on conventional media, social media becomes an important tool to circulate the knowledge. It's like if you don't have social media, I mean, we wouldn't have any idea about these leaks, this corruption scandal, this intelligence agencies, trucks carrying weapons, like all other scandals. I mean, that was the only medium that we follow these news. So we really need social media and the freedom to just to skip the censorship on conventional media. But I mean, as you said, we should also look for other ways of get organized and to circulate the information, because like female users and rural users, they are less than the others. So sometimes I have the feeling that we are always touching the same group. Like I mean, we cannot extend our access to different groups, different people that we haven't touched before. So we should invent these ways. I think it's an important question. I don't have the clear answers because we need to work on this. Like maybe direct contact with people in more suburbs. Like we should find, maybe sometimes we need to turn to more traditional methods like leftist organizations had in 60s, like one-to-one contact in factories, in neighborhoods. Because we have social media now, sometimes we are like, for example, the protest in Istanbul, it's always done in İstiklal Street, the major street, or in Kadıköy, which is the other center in Anatolian side. So, I mean, all the protests are getting organized in these particular locations. We don't have access to other neighborhoods. And if you're...
Is it a reason for this, that it's just in Kadıköy and İstiklal? Is it a reason for why you're all...
Reasons?
Reason for...
reason.
A specific reason why you're just in Kadıköy and İstiklal?
Because it's safer. I mean, because in a you can face violence from regular citizens in other neighborhoods. If you're talking about, let's say, LGBT issues, if you're making some critical slogans in certain neighborhood, you can face with violence. İstiklal and Kadıköy, they are more safe. And they are so central. I mean, a lot of people are getting exposed to your protests. These are the main reasons. But we cannot, I mean, there is a lot of restrictions now on even protests on streets. Many protests are not allowed by police in İstiklal. For example, last Pride Parade in June this year, it was a huge, like really brutal violence against protesters on İstiklal streets. And like last year, the year before, there were 30,000 people. It was one of the hugest, the most huge pride parades in Europe. It was like really historic last year's, but this year they just didn't allow it because it's coincides with the first day of Ramadan, the feasting. Yeah.
Okay, I have two questions. First, when I've been talking to different Turkish activists, some of them have told me that they usually have two accounts, both on Twitter and Facebook, one private and then one with not the real name, where they are more critical. And so my question is, like in Sweden, when you have we have laws that basically, I think one of the few reasons or ways where the police can actually interact and arrest someone is when there are like proper threats, like hatred online. And there have been shown that some of these, like we call them internet trolls, they go to public libraries and use public servers, so there is no way of tracking. Yeah, so my question is that, is there any opportunities for that, for activists that still wants to like keep their accounts or create new accounts if theirs are closing down, or like are there places where they can go and use like public computers where they can't be tracked to be critical? That's one question. And then the other one is like, for example, is these bans also restricting your access of international media? Can you sit in Turkey and Google, for example, Turkish activists being outside, or on TV, for example? I mean, like BBC and CNN, for example, they reported a lot on the Ankara massacre. Can you access can you see that in Turkey? I mean, of course, it's in English, so it's still very not accessible for everyone. But is it possible to view it in Turkey?
Yes, it's possible to view. There is no limitation for foreign websites. But as you said, the number of people who can read and understand English content is so limited. Like the English training in Turkey is really bad. Like when I see, for example, when I met with Lebanese friends, I can see the huge difference. Like for example, in Lebanon, they can, I mean, even a kind of older people, like on the street that you buy something, they can speak. I mean, maybe not very fluently, but they can speak, they can understand you. But in Turkey, I mean, the education and training, it's not good in English. So this won't be a kind of opportunity for us to be able to access to English websites. For your question about being anonymous to get rid of policing, yeah, there are some internet cafes that you can use. Also, we are not in our libraries, the technical devices are not that developed. I mean, we don't have that much computers, Wi-Fi in the libraries, but there are internet cafes, and they are a lot filtered. Like you cannot, for example, you cannot enter to the website of Chaos GL, it's Chaos Gay and Lesbian Association. In many cafes it is filtered because it has an LGBT content. I mean, it's an official, like, legal association, but you cannot access. Yeah, so I was going to say that, like you said, people have two different profiles. This is not mostly to avoid police. It's more related to the people that you edit you, like you're friends with. For me, for example, when I'm sharing some critical comments, sometimes, how many of you is aware of privacy settings on Facebook? Like, do you know how to set? Yeah, okay, you know, okay. But I use it really frequently. Like, I have a list of my family that I don't share LGBT related content. Yeah, to Okay, I need to stop. Okay. Look, they are watching. Okay. I forgot this. Okay. So I have this list of family, I have this list of business, like now thank God I'm working for an NGO, but previously when I was working for a corporation, I had this business list, so I didn't share critical comments to that group. I mean, when you're posting something, it's not the police that you're so concerned. It is police, but I mean, there are also other friends or other relatives that you want to avoid a kind of confrontation. Or, for example, you might have some friends who can complain about you to the police. Of course, they're not real friends, but I mean, someone you know from somewhere and you added each other, and he or she saw your post on the news feed. So there are a lot of cases like that. Like, for example, there was a teacher who posted something about Berkin Elvan, a small child shot to death by the police with the tear gas capsule. Yeah, and because that teacher posted some critical comments against that murder, some friends just complained about her and just get the screenshots of the post and go to the police, like send this to the police, and she just she lost her job. I mean, she was a public official in a school, and she lost her job, and now she is one of that people that I like. She's charged on like encouraging the society to break up the law, that sort of crime. So it's like, it's not the police, but the policing within the society, like this intelligence. Yeah.
Any other questions? I have one. Yeah. You showed on the slides earlier that it really took off in 2014 with the blocking activity from the states. What was the reason back then for this increased activity?
Do you mean the Twitter transparency report?
Yeah.
I think first, thanks to the legal changes. The first reason is this legal changes, because in 2014, as I said, Telecommunications Authority was allowed to block websites without a court order. So it became really efficient and quick, easy for them to block the contents. Also, I mean, they don't need to get a court decision to ask Twitter to remove the content. So it becomes more easy for them to ask Twitter this.
So basically it was a technical change that allowed the government.
I think that was one reason, and the other is when the country gets more authoritarian, I mean, they started to need more censorship, because the authoritarianism and like undemocratic practices getting rise and getting a lot of reaction from the society. And one reason is also that, like, previously the government was a kind of coalition between different groups. Like in the beginning of the rule of AKP party, like in the beginning of 2002, yeah. It's like 10 years, 15 years rule. So in the beginning, the first years till 2012, it was a powerful coalition with Gülen community. It's a kind of religious community. They were supporting AKP and Erdogan. But then there were some conflicts in this coalition, within this coalition. So they in 2013 it becomes clear that now they are just separated. They just this coalition was broken. Because Gülen community had a lot of information, like internal information, because they were in the police, they were in the legal structures, like they occupied a lot of important high positions in police, in legal courts. They knew a lot about AKP and Erdogan and his inner circle. They collected a lot of data, they stored a lot of data and confidential information about Erdogan. So when this coalition was broken up, all this hidden information was become publicized by Gülen community. That was all these leaks, like audio recordings, was circulated by Gülen community. And that's why in 2013-14 the government needed a lot, needed this censorship a lot to protect, to prevent Gülen community to circulate this information.
Okay, makes sense.
I have one question. What do you think about this, that the EU and Turkey is cooperating at the refugee issue? What do you think the
hypocrisy?
What do you think the world should do, and how? That's one question. And short, also, how much do you think that the result in the new election has been affected, like because of this freedom of expression limitations? Sorry for
no.
So yeah, partly the EU, Turkey, and the new results.
Okay. Yeah, it's like now all EU leaders and all like European Union officials, they know really clearly that Turkey violating a lot of basic principles of democracy and human rights, and that's why like the accession process, Turkey's EU accession process was suspended for a long time before this refugee crisis. But then they needed a kind of buffer zone between EU and the war areas, Syria. And now they just don't care about democracy and human rights now. And they made an agreement with Erdogan. This is so sad. Like, even like when we now, as like I as a civil society representative, I have a lot of concerns for this year's and the upcoming years EU funding for democracy and human rights. That now there is a really risk that all our funding coming from European Union will be cut and will be transferred to refugees. And now it's like they are creating a kind of trade-off between refugee, like solution for refugees, and democracy and human rights. I mean, these shouldn't be mutually exclusive. And EU should, of course, EU leaders should find safe solutions for refugee crisis, like housing, security, education. They have a lot of problems. So EU and Turkey should invest a lot of money for this, but this money shouldn't be came from democracy and human rights funding. So. And yes, Turkey and EU should collaborate to solve this refugee problem, but it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't, like Erdogan's position and our AKP government's current practices in terms of democracy and human rights, this shouldn't, I mean, EU cannot put a blind eye on these things. I mean, like imagine that no one can guarantee that there will be a civil war soon in Turkey, and what will happen if EU will suspend caring about democracy and human rights, and if it's going to be a civil war in Turkey, and if a lot of people will ask for EU the right to be like refuging, or how do you call it? Asylum seeker. I mean, what the EU will do when there will be a lot of Turkish citizens asking for asylum? It might be. Like, I know a lot of friends thinking about what we are doing here, why we are torturing ourselves here in Turkey. I mean, sometimes it comes to my mind also, like, why we are here? Because it's really torture your daily life. It's so much limited, and yeah. Do you have any other, like, did you have any other question that I didn't? Election.
Like
yeah.
Result if it's affected by.
First of all, yeah, it's like almost 50% of the votes. Like, they got 50% of votes. It's like 49.2 or something. It's not that it was not that fair election. Like in the, for example, there were a lot of censorship on conventional media for candidates from HDP, pro-Kurdish party, from Republicans party. Like, opposition, the coverage in conventional media about opposition parties and their candidates were so limited. Like, in, for example, state-controlled, like, official TV channel like BBC in UK, we have TRT. When you check the percents of coverage of opposition parties and AKP and Erdogan, it was like Erdogan and AKP is like 70% of all coverage, and these other three parties is just 30%. So even like the pre-election process, there were a lot of censorship, there were a lot of limitations, and like HDP, pro-Kurdish party, faced a lot of attacks, like violent attacks to their party offices in many cities. And it was like, sometimes it was like they tried to fire the office people. So it was not that secure, safe, free, fair elections. And during the voting time, especially in Kurdish parts of the region, there were a lot of armed police forces and soldiers in the voting areas. That's why many Kurdish people couldn't go to the voting areas and vote. And these are not like, these things are reported by independent observers. There were independent monitors in the country, foreign monitors, and in their report it's so clear that there were a lot of police with heavy arms. They were present in the voting places. So, but still, like 50% is a lot. Like, even if there were some fraud, even if there were some pressures on public, still we know that a lot of people are still supporting AKP. So it was still, they still got a lot of votes, like, even if the election was not that fair.
Okay, I think we have to wrap it up. Firstly, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for coming and listening that long.
And secondly, if you enjoy this and you think we're doing the right thing here, you're welcome to become members of FUF. It's 150 crowns for students and 200 crowns for others a year. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks.